Hey guys, so we're back. Sorry for the small interruption. So let's just do a recap. I'm Teniola Shoboale, and today we're going to be talking about today is World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, and like I mentioned earlier, human trafficking is a grave crime. And I'm very happy to tell you that, well, we have Saskia Koch with us. Let me just recap who Saskia Koch is. Saskia Koch is the head of Migrant Protection and Assistance Unit at the International Organization for Migration Nigeria. Before that, she was a consultant at the Assisted Voluntary and Reintegration Unit and Counter Trafficking Unit here in Nigeria. So some of you might be wondering, why is today so important? Well, human trafficking is a grave crime, and it happens not just the trafficking of people abroad, but also within Nigeria. So it's a very serious crime. Today is about you, it's about informing you, it's about the questions you have. So make sure you drop your comments, drop your questions. We will be talking about them before we end this live. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us, and let me just try and reconnect with Saskia and prove me that all goes well now. So let me just try and find her. Okay, so just waiting. Hey!
Hi. How are you?
I'm fine. It's been a long, journey to get here, but I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the delays. Technical issues are always there.
Not always your best friend. But everyone, this is Saskia Koch. I've introduced you. Just how are you? And thank you for joining us on our channel
Yeah,
today.
thank you so much. I'm doing very well, actually. Very well today. Thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Not too bad. Lagos
Good.
traffic.
Yeah, it's back. It's back. It was gone for a while, but now it's back. Yeah.
All right. Let's get into it then. So you've worked in Nigeria for a couple of years now. I think just over 2 years, if I'm correct.
Yes, 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years, yeah.
Wow. So how has that been for you?
It's been fantastic, actually. A lot of my friends who live in other countries are actually very curious to hear about Nigeria, and I always tell them one of the things that I love about the country is the creativity, the culture, the music, the art. So far, so good. Yeah, for sure.
I hope you've been able to have, take your opinion on the Nigerian jollof rice debate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, my friends introduced me to them. It's I've had moi moi, plantain, jollof rice debates, all of them. Yeah, very good.
That's great. Let's get into today's discussion then. The 2020 theme for the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons is it focuses on first responders on human trafficking. What effect has COVID-19 had on your work? Would you say it has made it more difficult in being able to identify and help victims of human trafficking?
Yeah, it definitely had an impact. The situation has been very difficult for our existing programming, but also, the general coordination. IOM is, as some of you might know, we are the International Organization for Migration. We are the United Nations Migration Agency, and our mandate is basically to facilitate and support governments, but mostly migrants, with including assisted voluntary return and reintegration, and basically to help to manage migration in a sustainable manner. And one of the things we do is whenever VOTs or victims of trafficking are stranded in countries, we help them return. So we facilitate the return process, we work through embassies, and we provide them with assistance. Now, the current COVID-19 pandemic obviously had a significant impact on movement restrictions and travel restrictions in Nigeria, but also globally. So we have seen a number of migrants stranded in countries who were unable to return due to these restrictions. And this was very unfortunate. Fortunately, we have very good relations with the governments, not only in Nigeria, but also globally. And one of the mitigative measures we have adopted is to look for the possibility of opening up humanitarian corridors, specifically for this group of stranded migrants. So we had a couple of return flights from Lebanon and Mali and Niger, to return migrants who were stranded and were in very dire conditions in those countries.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think this is the main impact. And of course, in Nigeria, we see challenges with reaching those who already are in the country and require support. So the coordination is much more difficult. So we have moved, a lot of the meetings and assistance to virtual means to be able to continue that service delivery.
I mean, even amid this pandemic, your work doesn't end. Even though like the whole world went on lockdown, your work kind of, increased in a way. Just yesterday, 109 trafficked Nigerian girls returned from Mali. What happens with people like that return back after facing God knows what in a foreign country and return back? How are they reintegrated into the society?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. And this is really one of our most important priorities. Obviously, our first priority is to get stranded migrants out of that situation. That's the most important thing. Yesterday, as you said, we received, or the day before, 109 migrants. What Nigeria does is we basically provide protection and assistance in the form of reintegration support to vulnerable migrants, but also all migrants in general. So we provide accommodation in places of safety, especially when they're trafficked victims. We also provide mental health and psychosocial counseling. Most of them come back with mental health issues due to the experiences that they have had. We also provide training and other medical support where necessary. And then once returnees are stable enough and they have gone through the first phase of the reintegration, they often go into what we call business skill management training. We basically provide needs-based counseling to help returnees get back on their feet. And this includes support with business setup or even job employment if that's what people would like to do upon return.
Saskia, how well would you say Nigeria is doing in the fight against, human trafficking? What are the challenges?
Well, I think, to be honest, Nigeria is one of those countries that has, like historically, but also currently, is doing very well when it comes to the interventions and the government support when it comes to trafficking. We work very closely with the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking, which is an agency mandated to tackle trafficking. Nigeria is also one of the first countries who ratified the international legal instruments on trafficking, the protocols. And so through that, a number of policies have been developed specifically to look at, okay, what can we do to address trafficking in terms of prevention, in terms of protection and prosecution. So these are three key areas and focus areas that we look into. The main challenge in Nigeria when it comes to trafficking, but it's not only Nigeria, it's over globally, it's that it's very difficult to track. So you might have a very extensive smuggling network in Edo State, but it's so lucrative. Globally, trafficking, they earn more than 250 billion per year. So there's a very high need and priority on the behalf of the traffickers to not be exposed. And that lack of data and information makes it very hard to identify traffickers prior or during that situation. Then obviously lack of information at community level. So most of the community, maybe households are not aware of what trafficking actually is. Someone might come and say, hey, I can bring your daughter to Europe or to Libya and provide this job opportunity, not knowing they're actually, lying to them and luring them under false promises. When someone does end up in a trafficked situation, sometimes people are not willing to testify. They've gone through a lot of bad experiences. Maybe they have been under threats not to say anything, maybe threats to their family, or so many things happen. And that complete picture makes it very difficult to eliminate.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most difficult things is that most of these people, most of the victims, it's from people that they know, family members. So it makes it much more difficult to persecute and identify the traffickers. But what advice would you have? How do we curb this? How do we deal with this?
Well, I think especially when you're looking at that level of intervention, especially when we look at the household level or whenever you know someone who has been involved in this, um, obviously the most important thing is for the community to be informed. What is trafficking and why is it a crime against the individual? How can we spot red flags? But I think to support and to prevent it is also to counsel and be inclusive to those who have gone through this experience. Sometimes you see that the victim, so the trafficked victim, still receives quite a lot of stigma from the community. Maybe they're urged not to say anything, or maybe they feel that they are, they will be end up in a negative situation, or whatever could happen. So I think it's very important for the community to play an important role, for the community to watch out for those red flags, but also to inform them about, okay, what is trafficking, what is smuggling, and how can we support those who have been victim of it to help support them reintegrate. There are, government agencies and the police who are very active in this area. So whenever you see something, to make sure that you refer to the right authorities.
Yeah, when we speak of internal human trafficking, it's become somewhat of a norm. I don't really want to use norm, but it has become somewhat of a norm, with children taken for their parents, usually with their consent, for domestic work in places like Lagos. It's less spoken about and somehow allowed to flourish. How do we deal with this?
Yeah, I think this is one of the main problems that we see, and it's very difficult to change, let's say, household push factors. We call them push factors. So, factors that prompt or push people out of the country, whether it's through smuggling or trafficking. And first and foremost, there are two or three areas that are important. The first one is to make sure that through these community level interventions, IOM implements interventions that are based on what we call communication for development. So to include not only the family, but also traditional religious leaders, other community members that play a role in that sensitization and information. If we manage to increase our knowledge and awareness, this has been proven to reduce the incidences of trafficking and smuggling. And I think a lot of the times, to be honest with you, when we speak to returnees or family members, I think a lot of the time there's no adequate information, maybe enough knowledge about the consequences of it. They probably thought, my dog will actually, be given a good opportunity. And I think that's unfortunately not the reality. So I think it starts with that kind of sensitization and information provision. I think secondly, what's very important is, in addition to that, making sure that there are enough avenues for people to reach out and get that information. We have migrant resource centers in Benin, Lagos, and Abuja who provide such information. If someone is thinking about migrating abroad, I think it's important to know where you should go. Yeah. Don't ask your neighbor, go to the right authorities. And I think that level of information and guidance is vital for preventing trafficking. I think finally, go ahead.
What would you say are the other major root causes of human trafficking, though, in Nigeria?
So we have returned about 20,000 migrants in the past 3 years, and we've seen through the data that we gather, more than 95% they migrate out of economic reasons. So obviously the presence of trafficking networks, family members who might be involved is an important factor, but for the majority, people actually feel they do not have the means to support themselves or their families, and that makes them vulnerable to opting such choices when they might know it might not be the best road to go for. And I think as a community, we also have the responsibility not only the government, but the private sector, everybody to see and to see how we can support those vulnerable communities by supporting livelihood interventions and making sure that people do not suffer, and for that to be such a significant push factor.
Yeah. And well, according to IOM in 2019, an astounding 94% of all Nigerian women trafficked to Europe for prostitution hailed from Edo State. Firstly, why is Edo a hub?
Mm. Yeah, so what we see in our data, the number that I just mentioned, there's 20,000 migrants. More in the beginning, 3 years ago, when we started the one of these programs, more than 50% returned back to Edo State. So we really saw that as a hub. Now, slowly, this has reduced to about 40% of returnees. But first of all, there's a lack of evidence in this area. So there's a lack of research, and especially when it comes to what we say the causality of things. But like I said, there are a number of factors. So first, it's the presence of trafficking and smuggling networks. I think Edo State historically has had a strong presence of such networks, and it's very difficult to dismantle those. I think some researchers say that it is also due to economic factors, but to be honest, that's not the only thing, because you also have other regions in the country and other countries where economic means are probably less available than in Edo State, but it is still a factor. And I think false circulating success stories. I think we sometimes underestimate what kind of power, that kind of, those stories. Okay, I know someone who traveled to Europe and the person is now earning, I don't know how much money per month. You should try the same thing. And I think this is what we see quite frequently. And of course, the desire to believe that. So I think it's a variety of factors, specifically for Edo State, but also other regions of Nigeria.
Yeah. Do you think the government is doing enough to curb it?
Yeah, okay. So I think we are working very closely with NAPTIP, as I mentioned, but also with the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants, and Internally Displaced Persons. Yes, there are lots of interventions happening at the moment. We are active in Lagos, in Edo State, in Delta State, Abuja. And not only in terms of prevention activities, but also how can we set up that coordination structure? How do we refer people to the right service delivery partners? But nonetheless, we need to keep working in this area because the problem is still there. And we need to identify those areas where we can strengthen our support. But the government is very involved and very committed to address this issue at different levels. Yes.
Let's talk about, the victims and identifying traffickers. We've already spoken about the fact that it's normally someone close to them, normally someone, a family member. But how can they get help in instances like this where a trafficker is approaching them? How do they get help?
Okay, so if someone is in Nigeria and they need support, the best thing is to reach out to NAPTIP. So and the police, of course, they have good relations with NAPTIP. So if you feel that something is going on, and there might be something going on that has within a network or something, you can actually contact NAPTIP. They have officers and they will be able to help and support you. We also have migrant resource centers, as I mentioned. We have one established. They are under the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, but they also provide information about, migration opportunities and so forth. They're based in Lagos, Benin, and Abuja. And we have the address on our website, but we're also happy to give that. Whenever someone is in another country, it becomes a little bit more tricky. But usually there are networks of CSOs and NGOs who are active. But most of the time, we get a referral either through the IOM office in different countries or via Nigerian embassy whenever someone is in distress. So there are different ways in which we can support. Usually when someone is stranded in another country like Saudi Arabia or Lebanon, IOM works very closely with the Nigerian embassy to facilitate that return and to get the person into safety. So it's very important that whenever you travel, even if it's through regular means, to make sure you have that information with you.
Saskia, let me just put you on pause for just a few minutes. I just want to remind
Sure.
our viewers, please send your question. This is about you. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, just send them through. I just want to, okay, someone has put a comment here saying, I would like you to talk about some of our brothers who are out of the country, the way they bring some people abroad and later abandon them. I think the person is trying to talk about people that, you know, they collect certain money and try and get people visa and then leave them. And normally this is normally a fake document and then leave them
Yeah.
a foreign country. What are you doing in that end?
Yeah, that's very difficult, and it's the same network that I was talking about earlier. It's the same, and someone might think that they're not trafficking someone but smuggling. Someone would probably say, okay, I want to go abroad, can you help me? The person might say yes, and then they arrange a fake document, a visa, and they get them abroad. And whilst they are in Libya, we see that pretty often, they are left stranded there. I think what I mentioned earlier, my same comment applies. Just whenever you go abroad, make sure you have that information. When you receive a visa, go to the Migrant Resource Center or go to the right authorities to check those documents before you go abroad. Make sure it's actually the right one. When you do have such information from someone who has been a victim of smuggling or trafficking, then it would be good for that information to be referred to the right authority so that investigations or criminal proceedings can start. That's my main advice for that.
Yeah, someone's also asking about say our borders are porous and the security services need to do more. Of course, you know, we have free movement across countries. So is the IOM doing anything to tighten security in terms of human trafficking along the borders?
Sure. Yeah. So what IOM does is we basically work through the government. And with the government. We basically provide assistance with the government in terms of priority areas. So we have a number of programs that look at border management, as well as the program that we are implementing here in terms of providing protection assistance and prosecution-related support. In the border areas, we have set up flow monitoring points to track migration flows, but we also work closely with border guards and the police to help them and to enhance their capacity on, identifying those red flags. When you see people, what do you do? How do you refer? How do you collaborate with with other authorities? We also work very closely with authorities at the federal level, so immigration service and state level, by the way, shouldn't forget that. Immigration service, they play a very important role, of course, especially when people fly out of the country. The irregular migration also happens through air. And we basically provide capacity building support. So again, in terms of enhancing the knowledge in trafficking, it's very complex, it's very diverse, and to help them identify those red flags. Another area where we support it is that cross-border collaboration. So whenever someone is stranded, how can we support the government in allowing that coordination to happen more efficiently, taking into account the rights of the migrants? So we work very closely through the government in these areas as well.
So someone's asking in the comments, is there a website where I can get the IOM reports for Nigeria for 2019? So I think the person's just after some information.
Yeah, so we have a lot of information on the IOM INT website. We also have, in terms of data, if you're interested in data, we have a website which is specifically focused on our displacement tracking matrix. It's basically including what we have established here in Nigeria and other countries. And you can go there by Googling the website migration.iom.int. And you will receive a lot of flow monitoring reports from Nigeria, but also, border areas and countries in the region and in other countries around the world.
Yeah, so I think one of the conception is migration is not wrong. It's doing it the right way that's, the way
Yeah.
it should be. What advice would you have for anyone who wants to migrate?
Okay, if you are thinking about migrating, I think my main advice, and it sounds more simple than it is, make sure you go through the right channels, get the right information, go to your local government office, go to the Migrant Resource Center, and make sure that you actually get the right information from the embassy. Oftentimes, embassies in Nigeria can also tell you more about visa regulations and requirements. And I think generally what we see, I mean, not specific to Nigeria, if you migrate for work, when you know you don't get a contract, or when you know someone is not giving you a visa, you know that something is going wrong, right? So you have to look at those basics. Am I getting that contract? What are the requirements? And so forth. So that level of information and preparation is really important.
Just to ask, what's the IOM doing today to mark the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons?
So we have a number of, let's say, public events. We work with NAPTIP. They have organized a number of events talking about trafficking, panel discussions. I mean, of course, we are talking about it right now, and this is happening in Lagos, Abuja, and in Edo and Delta State. I think one of the most important things that we're doing in collaboration with our legal aid partners is we formally launched the establishment of a legal hub in Lagos, Edo, and Delta State. And that legal hub is essentially focused on providing access to justice for victims of trafficking. So it's a collaboration with a range of government and non-government actors, private sector actors, who provide legal aid counseling. And we have had a range of consultations in the past months, and today was finally the launch, and it was in parallel on this day. So that's probably the most important. But we have a number of events going on.
That's great to hear, Saskia. So I'm just trying to see if there's any final comments from our viewers. Just scrolling, and if you have anything more to add, we'll be happy to hear it. Let me just scroll through. Okay, so I think we're through with the questions. I'm not seeing anything more. Okay, so someone has dropped a question. What's the relationship between IOM and Nigeria Immigration Services? And why do we hardly get to know the culprits of this trafficking?
What the relationship, I mean, we have a very strong working relationship with the Immigration Service. Like I said, here in Nigeria, in Lagos, we facilitate the return of migrants who are stranded. So at the airport, we provide reception and post-arrival assistance, and the Immigration Service is one of our partners, where they register those who have come back. So we have that partnership. But we also work with Immigration Service in terms of prevention. They're involved in a number of our capacity building and coordination initiatives. But in terms of what we do at the airport, we have supported the establishment of biometric registration. So I don't know, if you go to the airport now, you might have to give your fingerprints, and those fingerprints are stored in a system and allow basically travel to be more efficient, but also to identify those who are taking advantage. And that has been established. So if you go to the airport now, I know we're not having any flights, but you'll see that system there. So we work in terms of integrating those systems, and to make sure that border management is more efficient and effective. So that's the most. And then the second question was, why don't we see those who...
Yeah, why do we hardly get to know the culprits of this trafficking?
Right, okay. I think one of the key challenges with trafficking is it's very difficult to prosecute, right? So if a criminal proceeding is successful, someone is brought to justice. But in order to get there, there's quite a long process that goes before that, and you need a lot of evidence from the victim, but also probably from others who have been involved. And sometimes it's difficult. But if you look at the NAPTIP Facebook site or the website, they actually identify those who have been brought to justice and who have taken part in criminal proceedings, and they regularly actually publish news articles about those who have been brought to justice, and oftentimes this is also published in the news.
All right then. There's someone asking. I'm not sure exactly what centers it means, but maybe you might. Someone asks, do you have plans to get other centers across the country? I'm not sure if you understand.
Other centers in you mean other offices maybe?
Yeah, that's probably what you
Okay.
meant.
All right, yeah. So we have, so currently we have an office. Our main office is in Abuja. Then we have an office here in Lagos. I'm based in Lagos, and we have one in Benin City, Maiduguri, and Yola. Oftentimes our offices are established where the project management sites are. So I think as of now, we don't have any plans to expand. But of course, this is also dependent on where our programmatic, where our interventions lead us. So if we were to expand to the east or southeast, then we would look into that. But as of now, we don't have any plans to expand. However, we do work very closely with our civil society partners and non-governmental organizations. We're also always looking for partnerships to expand our reach. So we work very closely through our partners there. And that's always a main priority of us. Yeah.
Yeah, Saskia, what effect has the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown had not on your work, but on the victims of trafficking who before this pandemic were being reintegrated into the society?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think there are a number of, levels and factors that we need to take into account. If you look at the individual level, right, someone receives a reintegration package. Maybe prior to the pandemic, that reintegration package was worth more. You know, the pandemic has inflated prices. You can see in the supermarkets, and especially a few weeks ago, where the price of rice and vegetables, etc., went up. So that's a direct kind of implementation effect. When the lockdown was there, you know, these victims are not actually able to open up their businesses or even proceed with their reintegration. So that was a very significant factor that prevented them to be reintegrated. But I think on a larger, more abstract level, the current border closures and the flight restrictions also has an impact on the economy at large, right? Supply chains have been disrupted. The price of oil has been severely affected. And this also affects, you know, how much foreign direct investment goes into Nigeria. And that implicitly and indirectly has an effect on everybody in Nigeria, but especially those who are more vulnerable. And those who are in vulnerable situations, especially, you know, abroad, but also here, had, you know, no ability to move around. So we saw that especially those who, for example, are dependent on agriculture, and they had, you know, a business in Edo, but they were exporting something to Delta, that was also affected. So it's those local supply chain disruptions that were also, are also important. So I think these are the main areas that we see across our work, and that we also try to address within our current programming.
All right, someone says we can't abdicate our responsibilities to the IOM. Our various agencies like NAPTIP, Police, Immigration, and Customs need to do more. The responsibility is first nation, not just IOM. What would you say as individuals, as Nigerians, do we need to do more to put an end to human trafficking?
Well, I wouldn't say no to that because trafficking is still an issue. So yes, I think we should do more, definitely. And I think sometimes we forget that you and I have a responsibility, right? Whenever we see something happening, when you see someone being vulnerable, we should take care of each other, especially if you're in the private sector. We, IOM, are actively looking for partnerships. Obviously, you know, we are facilitating, but we don't want to be, you know, like involved until the end. But one of the things that I think is really necessary at this point is to develop concrete partnerships with the private sector to help people get more jobs, or to get them, you know, maybe even an internship or a training. And this is something that we are working in. So if if there are any private sector partners who are listening, then we are very much open to those opportunities. It could be a local private sector partner or a large multinational company, where I think this is a very important component. And I think when you have information about trafficking and you hear people talking about it, I think we also have a social responsibility to provide that right information, but also to help reintegrate people back home. And that social level or social responsibility is, I think, something that we should not forget as well.
All right then, Saskia, I think we've exhausted all the questions in the comment section. It's been an interesting discussion. Human trafficking is a really terrible crime happening everywhere. Actually, I was going to ask, do you think it's happening less now because of the COVID-19 pandemic, or it's just...
Right. Yeah. So we have been looking into those numbers, and I think generally what we see is because of the movement restrictions, there was a lot less movement in Nigeria, but also towards Europe. We saw a drop in arrivals in Europe and also in Libya. But it doesn't mean that there is a drop in trafficking. It could be because the economic situations of households went down or was impacted negatively. They are also more vulnerable to traffickers. So we might even see those trends changing in a few months from now, when maybe people have been lured, to these countries under the false promises. Once these restrictions are lifted again. So I think at the moment it's a little bit difficult to say what it has impacted, but when you look at the consequences, I would say that it has more of a negative effect than a positive effect.
Yeah, that is a scary thought, actually, and
Yeah.
very scary.
Yeah.
I think that's our discussion for today. It's been very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about
Thank you so much.
against trafficking in persons. You're doing an amazing job, and so everyone, Saskia is the head of minor protection and assistance unit at the International Organization here in Nigeria. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Same to you. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye. You too. Bye.